ASEAN foreign ministers will meet this week for the first time under the new chairmanship of Indonesia. I spoke to the country's former foreign minister, Marty Natalegawa, who explained why the bloc has failed to make any headway in ending the violence in Myanmar. Now, in his words, the ongoing conflict is now an existential threat to the ASEAN community.
First and foremost, it is important for ASEAN member states, the 9 ASEAN member states in this case, to be able to consolidate and to have a real, frank and candid exchanges that we are all on the same page on the issue of Myanmar. And the decision to exclude the political representatives from ASEAN Summit and ASEAN Foreign Ministers is an extremely important decision. But, to make it even more meaningful, I think, it may not be sufficient to simply leave the seat vacant, but rather to actually invite openly the NUG to take up that seat in the absence of the junta's presence. And I think that will be a wake-up call to the junta that their intransigence, their not turning up, is actually not cost-free to them. Isolation for the junta is their comfort zone, by the way, and there I don't think they feel being isolated and having the notion of like the world against them is the comfort zone for as far as the junta is concerned. So we need to be sure that it's not an empty seat that ASEAN is having with Myanmar, but we have the NUG actually and the other democratic representatives be there to speak about the developments in Myanmar.
But Dr. Natalegawa, who gets to determine who those stakeholders are? If the junta can merely, ascribe the fact that they say that, well, we're going to designate this particular group a terrorist group, as an example.
I know that I risk misunderstanding in what I'm saying here. When I call for some kind of a dialogue involving all the parties concerned, giving credibility or legitimacy to the junta. But we need to have them in the room, tell them what is expected of them, and to hold them accountable. At the moment, it's a perfect world for them because they can simply, deal with the people who they like, who they are friendly with. We have the prospect of a so-called elections to be held in Myanmar. We have been reading reports at the middle of this year. Now, that will be extremely important for ASEAN to anticipate. Surely this is the time for ASEAN to signal clearly to the world and to the junta an election in the current circumstance will not be recognized by ASEAN. It will be a sham election, and that we call on the release of all political prisoners, including Aung San Suu Kyi. And this kind of messaging must be sent right now, not be made after a sham election is held and ASEAN is seen to be procrastinating or being divided.
Is it your firm belief, Dr. Natalegawa, that if elections were to be held at some point this year under the prevailing conditions that we see in Myanmar, that any result could not possibly be democratic?
Couldn't agree more with that kind of impression or conclusion. How can we have an election in the current circumstance when people are being shot at, women, children, all the vulnerable members of Myanmar society are being shot at, and the civil society are not given voice. And to have, that is why I think it's extremely important for ASEAN to, at the moment, from now on, to relay the message that whatever election that is being held elections that are being held under the current circumstance will not be part of the solution. It will not obtain ASEAN recognition, and that it doesn't mean that whomever is elected by that election will somehow then be able to turn up at ASEAN Summit.
As talk of these elections continues to sort of bubble up now and again, how should ASEAN better respond then to this?
There is a risk unless we get all our position all on the same page. If such an election is held, just look at what's happening now at the United Nations General Assembly. Whenever a resolution on Myanmar is voted on, or on the Human Rights Council in Geneva, there is not a common ASEAN position. Now, I think it is extremely important for ASEAN to be able to begin from now, not quite choreograph, but at least anticipate what their response would be. And Indonesia will be having that key role as well to navigate. I hope Indonesia can continue its traditional role of, on the one hand, pressing for continued progress on good governance, human rights, democratic principles issues, but at the same time, maintaining the unity of the ASEAN home, because it is a twin objectives. It is not one at the expense of the other. And what I'm seeing over the past couple of years is that we have been extremely eloquent on the one of them, which is the pushing for Myanmar's democratic agenda, but the ASEAN unity is fraying somewhat.
Dr. Natalegawa, why should the people of Myanmar believe that ASEAN can do more for them, that they haven't been forgotten, and that ASEAN can, in fact, wage peace for Myanmar? I
think the situation that is now transpiring in Myanmar over the past couple of years, in a way, perhaps, is the consequence of a foreign policy outlook in this part of the world in recent years that has become inward-looking. Things like promotion of democratic governance and etc. is no longer seen to be a primary preoccupation. Countries tend to be more looking at immediate material benefit in their foreign policy outlook, mercantilist in their outlook, and as a result, we have allowed progress that was still vulnerable and fragile to backtrack and to face headwinds, and we are where we are. And what makes me despondent in some ways is that we are losing the confidence of the Myanmar people in terms of does ASEAN matter? Can ASEAN actually make a positive difference? We have mattered in the past. And in delivering, in making sure that democratic transformation occur in Myanmar. Myanmar issue is not only a litmus test for ASEAN. It is a litmus test, clearly, but it is now an existential threat to ASEAN community